of a now I forget his name.
Hmm.
Wrote Watchmen.
Yeah.
Oh, Alan Moore.
Alan Moore.
Alan
Oh, and
Moore is
his
like
scripts are
super detailed, like every
yeah.
little thing he will
Mhm.
describe. And then, you go for like Frank Miller is like, yeah, have
Oh
Lo
God!
have Lois
No, no,
here.
no! Don't
Make her
mention him!
hot.
Don't mention him! No,
They're going to
Well,
stab
and
her
also
ass.
and all
So
and also by the
Are we
by
dying?
by
Where's my cross? Where's my cross?
by the way we're live. Hi everybody watching.
As already mentioned, Frank Miller.
Yay.
We've already so and also it depends. Kara asked a really good question that we were in the process of answering as we went live, which is when there's a creative team on a comic book, let's say, and it's a writer and an illustrator, how do they work together? And Joe was answering that it depends a lot on the situation. And I mean, what I didn't realize for a very long time is that, like, especially if it's like a monthly comic and the artist and the writer don't necessarily know each other all that well, it's just that they've both been assigned to this book by their editor or their publisher.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of get what you get. Like the
Mhm.
writer turns in their script and then it's given to the artist or the
Mhm.
penciler, and then they interpret it, however they interpret it. And if the writer has a problem with it, unless it's like a major thing where it, affects the story in some way, you just kind of get what you get. And if it didn't turn out exactly the way you envisioned it in your head, well, hey, we got a deadline, that's just the way it is.
So the thing is, if you've got artist and storyteller in the same space, you can have some degree of interaction. And I would imagine, I've got to believe that a number of comics books start out as storyboards, do they not?
That is essentially what they are.
Yeah.
Look, I can't speak to the collaborative process because I'm the illustrator and the writer. I plan all this out myself.
You cut out the middleman.
A big part of it is just estimating, like, okay, how much space does this panel need? How important is this section? How much do I want to zoom in on this character's face? Things like that. And you do have to be economic with it. There have been times when I found I had to trim down certain scenes. I didn't, like, maybe this shot isn't so important. There were times when I wound up expanding a scene a whole extra page because I felt it needed more room to breathe. And that's what it essentially is. You're making storyboards. The problem is how restrictive most of the comics industry is. Most comics about superheroes and such, they have to be 22 pages, sometimes just 20 pages if they want to squeeze in a few more advertisements. And it results in some issues feeling incredibly, congested, and some that are just padded out and almost nothing happens. Whereas with my books, if I only need 12 pages for a chapter, it'll be a short one. If I need 35 pages, it'll be a longer one. So I'm able to, let the scenes flow more like you are watching a movie.
You're not holding yourself to any particular artificial constraints, which I think is smart as hell.
Well, that's the funny thing is I have sometimes just as practice tried to restrict myself. Like, okay, here's a fan fiction I'm doing just to fiddle around with like certain genres or whatever. I'm like, okay, this time I'm going to make sure that each chapter fits within this many pages. How tight can I make it? How effectively can I tell the story? But I do find I work best when I'm able to breathe.
Yeah. Well, because being able to work within limits is a really good skill to have.
Everybody does. Even novel writers feel like, well, if the chapter's going to be one line, my chapter's going to be one line. That's it. You're going to live with that. Now walk away. No, I have read books where I think I got to the middle and chapters 4, 5, and 6 were one line. I thought, oh, okay, I'll move on.
Adam does that a lot with like
very experimental storytelling. Yeah.
So
I don't know if it was experimental. It was one of these religious. I went through a period of reading a lot of religious books like Ben Hur and the Robe and
oh boy,
yeah. Don't ask. Just don't.
Oh, yeah. On the subject of comic books,
just don't.
the last one I read.
They were fun, but once I got to university and really kind of did theology as a degree, I kind of realized it's not quite that simple. It's not this wonderful, happy, skippy, jumpy. And then I noticed that all these films, they're all very clean. Has anyone ever noticed that? It's like the Hammer films are all very clean.
Oh,
that Marvel look,
scruffy or blood covered. And nobody awful dies. They might suffer, but they don't die. They just suffer.
All pretty white teeth. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty white
Okay.
teeth. That nobody's got rotting teeth falling out of their head, you know.
Matt, you were trying to say something, and then Brian has his hands up. So, Matt, you go for it.
Thanks. While just on the subject of comic books, the last one
Yeah.
I read was Old Man Logan.
Oh.
Anybody, any thoughts on that one? I enjoyed it.
I'm afraid I
but
haven't.
there are
I
some
don't think I've read
aspects
that
aged.
one. Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't think I've read that one.
I've seen the movie Logan, and that was awesome. But like,
The
now
movie-
And he was an old man in that, sort of.
Yeah. The movie it's based on is much better in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, they're both entertaining, but
Yes.
Logan
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
had-
At least the movie didn't have a family of inbred Hulks.
yeah.
Oh, you say that like a bad thing now. Come on.
Yeah.
From the
Speaking of
South?
which, I'm hoping there is season 2 of She-Hulk, because season 1 was a hoot and 3/4. That was just fall down funny.
I think
Well,
they pretty much
the
said
way
there's
nerds
not
lost
going
their
to
minds
be
because
a She-Hulk 2.
the way nerds lost their minds because she twerked and twerking is bad. This
Oh,
show is
God.
bad.
Why do we
It
have
was
a woman?
Issue though of
manufactured
Come
outrage
on.
from the right.
It was awful from the point of view of a woman. I mean, it makes us look like we're all this bunch of self-serving, oh God, sex morons, and all we want to do is say to you men, now go away, you're scum. Be gone. We're much better than you. Go away, you're scum. Sorry, I'll stop doing that. And we're not. We don't think like that, you're free. Sorry, I'll go away. I'll stop. I'm seeing.
I thought it was funny.
Sorry.
I thought it was
Like-
really, really funny.
What's
Anyway, Brian,
annoying
your
is
hands up.
Oh, sorry.
So it's
Thank
okay.
you.
Brian's
First of
had his
all,
hand up for a
and
while.
if you get demonetized for this, let me know. Happy.
Okay, and you can give me money for it. No, go ahead.
Happy Zombie Jesus Day, everybody.
Yes.
I just
Happy
wanted to
Easter.
ask a question for the group. I know, Nick, you're an illustrator and a writer. I know a couple of other you have talked about creative processes before. I just finished my first novel. I'm starting in my second one. I
Wow.
wanted to talk about the creative process and ask you what stimulates you, what gets you going. I mean, Steve, you're on a production line.
Yeah.
Your output makes you look like Saturday Night Live full time.
Oh, but better.
But you don't
honestly.
have a team of writers and a group of people who can do designs and all that other crap. You do it all yourself. How do you find
That's why the quality isn't higher than it is. Well, I know for me personally, and then everybody else who has anything to say can please chime in. But I know for when I'm writing my videos, if I get what feels like a really good idea, but I know that I can't use it right away, like I already have stuff lined up for the next week or so, and I know I'm going to have to sit on it. If I get an idea, I will immediately open a new. I do most of my writing on Google Docs nowadays, and I will immediately start a new document and just write down whatever I thought of. So that I've got it, so that if I forget, it's there and I can remind myself.
Captured a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it'll come out in a form that I end up using just verbatim, like I don't need to edit it. I can just come back and add to it. But other times it's just thoughts, it's just bits or ideas, and I need to take that and shape it and make it into something later on when the time comes to actually write the script. But a lot of it is just I get an idea and I'm like, oh, that might be something, write it down.
Yeah.
And then some of it is just making yourself right. There are times when, because you're right, I am on a production schedule and I do like to keep the videos coming out on a regular basis. And there's times when it's let's say a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and I know I'm supposed to be writing, and I have something in front of me that I'm supposed to be working on for next week, and it's just not happening. And I need to sometimes it does help to get up and go away and do something for a little bit and come back, and that can kind of shake something loose. But, for me, the way you write is you just sit there and you make yourself write. And, and sometimes what you write will come out and you won't be able to use it. Sometimes I'll know as I'm writing, okay, I'm going to have to come back to this. Like, this isn't good. This isn't good enough. I'm going to have to come back at this, but I just keep going because I want to get a completed draft. And then I can go back and say, oh, wait a minute. If I say this instead of this, or if I move this down here and blah, 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 it kind of comes together. But I mean, you just have to do it, but I found that, like, saving ideas that come to me that I know I can't use right away, but just writing them down somewhere so I can get back to it is really
next
important.
To my bed so that if I had an idea when I slept, I could write it down. And
I know some people used to use tape recorders. Or say something into your phone.
I have about 100 books with various different notes and various different starts and middles of books and some book plans. It's that bad. I can type it, but often it's like, I always say it's like trying to shape a horseshoe cold, because it's like biting.
That's a good analogy.
It's like biting everything to just get it down. And this latest one I'm doing, which is one I've wanted to do for ages, there's this big thing, I don't know if you noticed, in the sort of, I wouldn't call it the literature industry, but there's a whole slew of Pride and Prejudice variations. Most of them which Wickham and Caroline Bingley get their comeuppance, some which they don't, some which Elizabeth runs away. And I wanted to write one, but writing it has proved the most. I would rather stab myself in the heart with a letter opener 100 times. I think I'm going to go back to fantasy, because at least with fantasy, I knew where I was going. This one, it's like, oh, for the love of God, can I please go away now? But I promised my niece I'd write this damn book. And quite frankly, I'm up to chapter 5 and I really don't want to do any more. And she calls me up and says, how's the book going, Auntie Cara? It's not. And I go, it's fine, Felicia. Really, it's fine. It's fine. And I put the phone down, look at my husband and go, can I stop? Please, can I stop?
It's not fine, actually.
I'm 59 years old. I turned 59 this month, and I have worked in a bar as a DJ. I've worked at the crappy jobs that you have to work to support yourself while you're not getting paid as a DJ, like McDonald's. I've done telemarketing. I did social work for a lot of years, where I helped people fill out forms and get them in touch with the help they needed. And about 4 years ago, I was managing a homeless shelter, and I was supposed to work 20 to 30 hours a week. I was working 60 to 80.
Wow.
I had a stroke and went down, and it's taken 3 years, almost 4, to get to the point where I can walk again without a cane. And in that process, I decided I was never going to work for anyone again. I would be my own boss. And I was going to do creative stuff, because my degree's in English lit and drama. And it's just, you get to a point where the creative process, it's all consuming. You're constantly coming up with stuff, or you're throwing out lines to your friends, or in conversations that could be, good in a novel or a video or whatever. But it's just, I have not having the boss to put me on the clock has been problematic. It's like, oh, I'll just watch this video, and then 6 hours later I'm down a YouTube rabbit hole or something.
I know it can be tough to impose the discipline on yourself. I know, like, I've been so long in my current routine that, like, that part of it doesn't really bother me anymore. But I mean, and so, like, I've had the experience of, like, I'm all done for the night. I'm literally undressed in bed, about to go to sleep, and an idea will come to me, and I will get out of bed and wake my computer up and write it down, because I'm like, I don't want to forget this. I feel like this is like or it'll be like something. It'll, like, there will be. I'll be writing. I'll be writing a video, and it's almost done, but I don't have the ending. And it's like, and I'm like, all right, I'll just leave this for tomorrow. I'll take the rest of the day off, and I'll come back to this because I have time to do this. And I'll be
globes.
I'll be about to go to sleep, and I'll get out of bed, and I'll be like, that's the ending. I'm like, that's the ending. I've got the ending, and I'm almost asleep, and I have to get out of bed and write the ending, because I'm afraid I'll forget it if I wait till the morning. So
it drives my husband nuts, because as I
Yeah.
said, I've got loads and loads of books by my bed. Sort of, I kind of do a thing in handmade books and all these handmade books, and I'll nudge Edwin and go, I've written this down. What do you think of this as an idea for the middle of the story? Do you think this is a good kind of rising kind of despair or a rising sort of storyline? And he looks at me because by this time he's been asleep for half an hour, and he looks goes, and he kind of you'll say something, and you'll say something, for the love of God, Cara, shut the up and go to sleep.
Just go to sleep.
That's part of the problem with the creative process is that when you're a writer, an illustrator, a painter, whatever it is that you do, that you create, it's hard to find a consistent and reliable audience. Because 90% of the stuff that I give to people, they say, oh, that's great. Well, don't tell me that. I know that. You know, don't feed the ego more than it already has been fed. Tell me what I did wrong.
Yeah, I was talking about that on
what
the.
you wanted somebody to say, well, it's great up to this point, but after that, it sort of loses. It seems to lose its traction. And I know asking you to go back and redraw it is a bit much, but you're not as invested in the characters because you've gone off tangent a bit. That's what you want to hear, even though you might not want to hear it. It's like for all that Edwin complains, when I do give him sort of drafts of my book and say, what do you think? He'll kind of go, well, this chapter is good, Cara, but if you're supposed to be concentrating on your main character, why have we suddenly gone off to the side and we're dealing with mythical cryptids? You've never mentioned them before. Why are you mentioning them now? You've not really introduced them, and I have to go, oh, bugger, and then go back.
See, it's the complete opposite with me. I am so critical of every idea that pops into my head that I'm always wondering, is this going to land? Did this scene turn out okay? Oh, I don't know about this one. So I end up I end up being surprised by consistently positive feedback, because how am I supposed it's like I don't trust my own ego or opinion. How am I supposed to know if it's any good unless somebody tells me?
I find that your ego is either way up here or way down here.
And trust me, Nick, I am telling you, I actually like this stuff. I'm not telling you because I'm your friend.
Thank you.
Geek, your hand has been up for.
I'm sorry, just one quick comment.
Sure.
The DJ video or the Best Man video that you did, Steve.
Oh yeah,
I was a DJ in a bar. I hosted a lot of receptions, and that was the funniest and most accurate thing I think I've ever seen.
Oh God,
a little drunker, it would have been perfect.
Yeah. That is loosely based on an actual experience I had. Now, I didn't go down in flames like that guy did in the video. It wasn't that bad, but it was like I was a best man at a wedding, and that happened to me, where the DJ said, let's have the best man say a few words, and I gave the toast, and then like half an hour later they said time for the toast, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And I just, and it wasn't like I didn't, completely, what happened in the video didn't happen, but I just kind of yammered for a few minutes and kind of came up with something, and it was terrible. And I was very uncomfortable and nervous. And I was like, I said the thing I already was going to say. Now I have to say another thing, so that it wasn't funny. But that experience was like, I've had that in my head for years, and I thought I should do a video where that happens. But
I was in the
actually funny.
I was in the exact situation. I almost blew the toast at my brother's wedding, but I was able to wing it and wrap it up pretty quick. And I just at the end, I gave a thumbs up. Everyone loved it for some reason.
Oh, thank God!
I had the dubious joy. There were 2 weddings at my venue when I got married. And the second one was a military wedding. I don't know if it was Royal Marines or Army, but whatever it was, there was a fisticuffs.
Oh, lovely.
We're sitting down for the meal because it's a sit-down meal, and we can hear the fight in the other room.
I was the DJ once. I played the chicken dance. Mandatory at a wedding.
Sitting at the top table with our heads in our hands, thinking. He's trying not to laugh because he's kind of, this is totally surreal and hilarious. And there's me with my head in my hands going, oh God almighty, what will my parents
Hope the
think? What will my
photographer caught
family
that.
think? What, sorry?
I hope the photographer caught that.
Yes.
Oh no, he'd already zoomed off. And it was
Oh,
like,
that's great.
and if my brother-in-law took any photos of it, he never showed them to me. But he did move. He did whiz off for about 20 minutes. So I rather suspect that he got some photos of the fisticuffs, because I remember that they came round to the table and they were very solicitous, saying, we're going to offer you a free bottle, each table a free bottle of champagne. And I remember thinking, why? And I did say, why? Well, you didn't make a fuss. And I felt saying, we didn't know how to make a fuss. What do you mean we didn't make a fuss? We're sitting there thinking, oh, don't let it overspill into here. And of course, there's my husband, who's just having hysterics, because it's all totally surreal the way everybody's kind of, you can hear the crashing and banging. I mean, there were chairs being thrown.
Chairs being thrown.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Dominate for
Yeah.
a few
Yeah,
minutes.
we can hear bottles going and chairs being thrown, and everybody's carrying on eating, making polite conversation like there's
Oh my
nothing
God.
going on.
I
you hear in the
wish I had
distance
ever been
something-
to a wedding that interesting.
You hear in the distance
Oh.
somebody
Well,
saying,
Thinking
"What do you
back,
mean?"
yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead. Thinking
You hear
back,
somebody in the distance, someone going, "What do you mean I'm not the father?"
I mean, it had to start for some reason.
If they're
I don't
throwing
know.
chairs, one question: does it have to have started as a Jewish wedding where they already had the chair up?
The chair
Wait,
was
the
in
chair
play.
breaks off.
The chair was in play already.
I
Yeah,
don't know
the
about that. I do know we came round later because brides aren't supposed to meet one another. God alone knows why. What do they think we're going to do? Claw each other's eyes out? We're usually more civilized than that. And there's blood down her dress.
Oh,
remember-
Wow.
lovely.
Blood down the front of her dress. No, she hadn't bled out, but obviously someone had been bleeding the front of her dress, and she wasn't really very happy about it. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And I remember
No.
looking at it and saying, "That's a very pretty dress." And she just looked at me as though I'd slapped her and said, "Yeah, it was," and walked off. And I thought,
Oh, jeez.
oh God, bad words,
Oh,
you know how you
man.
can just, Hessian in mouth syndrome, as my
That's-
brother had said.
I was
That's
DJing at a
almost like
wedding once.
the second worst reaction to that. The first would just be like no words, just starts ugly crying.
My beautiful dress.
I DJed a wedding once where I played the chicken dance.
Horrible long
Yeah.
train. No, she didn't do that. She just looked really totally packed off with just about everything. But she was obviously had to stay there because it was the reception and the family. And
Sure.
I hosted a
Oh.
wedding once where I played the chicken dance. 12 guys came out and started punching each other on the dance floor. And there was
Okay.
one bouncer and me, and we had to break it up.
I mean,
And I got my nose broken. So I was wearing a white shirt and a tie. I bled all over the shirt and tie. And it was stopped because the father of the bride was a deputy sheriff. And he and his 6 buddies all got their guns and badges out. And real quick.
we're gonna dance the chicken dance right now.
You're under arrest for violating the Poultry Act.
The Poultry Act. Okay. Now
Johnny
we've had
Goodman
two
from
people.
the Big Lebowski is just like, everybody dance the chicken dance
Can
now.
we,
Do it now!
Have a turn.
Everybody, we've had 2 people with their hands up for like an hour and a half. So
I
Geek, go
apologize.
for it. It's okay. It's all your fault, Brian.
A couple of quick things. I talked to Velvet Cat and he can't make it, so that's why I didn't send him the link. Isaiah Taylor's not here because he is working, so there's that. And I think way back for the creative process about the challenge of have to fit the story in the limited time. The one thing I raised my hand up for was the very last thing that Satoshi Kon did. The director of Perfect Blue, Millennium Mattress, Tokyo Godfathers, Paprika, and the 13-episode series of Paranoid Agent. He did a 1-minute short film called Ohio. Good Morning is worth too, and it's I like how he approached it. It's not like, oh God, I got only 1 minute to tell a story. No. He sees like how can I fit a lot of a story into 1 minute? And that's what he did with like the 1 minute short of Ohio. And so I like it's just like think of it that approach. Try to do it that approach. It's like how can I fit so much story into such a constrained space? I think that's the better approach to it.
Sometimes the limitation is a good thing. I mean, I know like my own very, very limited experience with this is when I write those in the last couple of years when I write those Stuffy and Friends shorts. And I want them to be able to be YouTube shorts, and YouTube shorts are a maximum of 1 minute. So I mean, it has to be like 1 minute or less. And I'm used to writing from, in previous years, I'm used to writing Stuffy videos where, they're as long as I need them to be. And they would range anywhere from 10 minutes to 25 or 30 minutes long, depending on what all I wanted to happen. And now I'm like 1 minute, and it's okay, get to the joke, get to the gag. Don't try to do everything.
Don't in writing class was the professor said, I need you to write a 10-page short story with no dialogue.
Yeah.
You have to have characters, but they can't speak to one another. And that was a challenge.
That's a good exercise. And another one is the exact opposite of that, which is just write. This was one of the first writing exercises we did, and one of the first writing classes I ever took in college was just two voices talking back and forth. No descriptive action at all. Not even a he said, she said, he yelled, nothing. Just alternating dialogue.
There was a fanfic Star Trek thing that I read years and years and years ago. It was Spock and McCoy trapped, waiting to be rescued by the ship. And they were arguing back and forth. And it was weird because the first time you read it, it was like stream of consciousness. But the second time you were assigning the voices of Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelly to the lines because you figured it out. It was really well done.
It's a good exercise. And it's also a good exercise if you're blocked, like it could have nothing to do with the thing you're blocked on. If you're writing, something for, if you're writing a novel, you're trying to write an article or whatever, if you just turn away from it for a second and just to get your juices flowing, just start with a blank page and just two voices, and you don't even know what they're talking about. You just let it kind of take whatever direction it takes just to kind of prime the pump. Okay, lessons learned. Your hand's been up. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, I say that I'm being most productive when, I have a schedule and, but it has to be not just about writing schedule or production schedule. It has to be about everything. I have to schedule everything. So exercise in the morning, stuff like that. Because if I slip a little bit, everything sort of piles on. It's like, well, I can do this later, and then I do this later. But also the old adage of killing your darlings also kind of works. Because I've been, for example, a couple of months, really up to a year, trying to make a video about Rosen's Universal Robots. And because I find it fascinating and, old school woke and et cetera, which has been something I've been in my head for a while. But I couldn't do it because the play itself is rather dry, right? And very little happens on set, right? It happens, it's all described, the wars, the things, and everybody should read it. It's very interesting because it's the first robot apocalypse story. But it's so dry that I'm like, how do I make this happen? It's like, well, I'm gonna have to put it aside. It has to be put aside because the more time I spent on this one thing, which I've become obsessed with, the less time I have with everything else because everything else gets slide out. So, sometimes you have to decide, listen.
And a friend who calls that adding mayonnaise to the story.
Yeah, you love this idea, but it's not working. Move to something else.
Yeah, and that can be and that can be tough if you're really attached to the idea, but sometimes it's the only thing you can do.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mention RUR because that was mentioned in the foreword or the introduction to the Caves of Steel, Asimov's Caves of Steel, which just on a lark, I just picked up and reread over the last couple of days. And it just reminded me how much I love Asimov's voice. I haven't read him in a long time. Obviously, he hasn't, produced anything new, being that he's long since been deceased. But I always thought it was interesting that
Tupac.
Yeah.
Well, he always, he started out with those things all couched as detective mysteries. I mean, Caves of Steel, Naked Sun, Robots of Dawn, and yet he had the flavor of science fiction in there, and I loved that.
Yeah, but he also was the anti-K-pick when he was like, no, the problem is engineering. You just have to fix engineering. That's it. Robots will be fine if we just put a couple of rules and that's it. And then every story is how the rules get violated or something goes wrong. I'm like,
yeah, but that's where the fun comes in. I mean, that was iRobot in a cocked hat. iRobot was entirely about, okay, we've got these 3 rules. How badly can we fuck up with the 3 rules? Answer, pretty badly.
Yeah.
And it's amusing because he wrote them before a lot of computer logic was done. And the funny thing is, because that was the case, he never really addressed the primary problem with the 3 rules, which is defining particulars in definition of what is considered harm, what is considered inaction, what is considered a human. Like all of those things are like make a concept as solid as the 3 rules kind of impossible in programming language.
Yeah, can you imagine the code overhead in implementing the 3 rules? I pity the coder that wants to write that.
Kind of impossible. That's kind of the problem with self-driving cars.
Yeah, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. You know, a self-driving car has to be almost the embodiment of the 3 rules.
But what I like about Asimov is he never assumes you're stupid.
He never talks down to his audience.
No. So you open a book and he automatically plunges you into that world and you have to figure it out. He never sort of gives you well, God, what's it called? An explanation? I'm sure that's how you say it. He never gives you...
He doesn't. He doesn't.
He never gives you an exposition dump right at the beginning.
He integrates the explanation into the flow of the story itself.
Yeah.
I think Robert Heinlein does very much the same thing with a lot of his stories as well, and that's why they're my 2 most favorite authors.
Heinlein was really good in like the one that was made into the movie about the bugs. That was
Starship Troopers.
Yeah, except that
Starship Troopers.
What's
the book
his
is
name?
completely
Just
different than
completely.
the movie. Yes, and it's excellent.
Yeah. But I mean, he completely lost the Marshall philosophy in that, and which is why Virginia Heinlein pulled his credit from the movie, and I don't blame her, because it was almost a parody more than it was a representation of the novel.
I feel like that's not giving him enough credit to say that he lost the Marshall thing. Growing up with fascism, he understood the Marshall outline of it and was criticizing it. Like that seems, I don't know, it seems...
I felt the cutscenes in the movie between, advertising the army and all that other stuff. I grew up in the Reagan era, and it immediately made me think, oh yeah, this is about Reagan. This is about what could be.
Because you have to understand,
kind of predictive.
The problem with the book, if there is one, is that you have this this fascist society where, hey, it actually seems to be working out pretty well. Like people stare at a living and stuff. You do not want to do that. You do not want to portray a fascist dictatorship
communist country, but I'm
functional.
I think the director of Starship Troopers kind of like read the first 2 chapters of like Starship Troopers and basically metaphorically threw the book across the room and said, "I'm not doing that," and just went off into his own thing. And at least with the movie knew it was satire, unlike the book.
Actually, he did follow the book to a certain degree. I mean, certain elements of the book he did follow, but it still has multiple problems. And I mean, I'll break out the book because I have the book, and I'll break it out and read it. It is still one of the hardest books for me to get through because the philosophy is so antithetical to who I am.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, quickly,
go for
it. John Burns has a couple of super chats, I suppose.
Yes,
so,
bless his heart.
$7. Hey, is there an update on World War III? Oh, I'm my Vulcan friend, and we have first contact. We can't have first contact until World War III. Any reports from Russia, Steve Shives?
I John, thank you so much for the super chats. I am simultaneously intrigued and terrified by the way your brain works.
I have several conversations with you on Facebook, John Burns. I don't know how your brain works
It's like, oh, that's not anything I would have thought to say.
Also, John Burns has another
Yes.
chat.
Those are indeed words.
Yes, those are R&D words. She-Hulk Honest Trails is very fun. Okay, and like another one, why Jesus white? Because the Vatican copied people right?
I mean, I think from what I take the meaning of that to be, if I understand it correctly, which is a very iffy proposition, but if I understand it correctly, I think I agree with that. That is the reason why Jesus is white, because the Vatican says so.
And he has a six-pack.
Well, never mind the fact.
And the Vatican
Take a
was
look
in
at the
Rome.
skin color of the
Yeah.
Pope and the Curia.
Yeah.
I read an
Yeah.
article this morning from AP.
also
Was
look-
Jesus
but
brown?
also-
It was interesting.
Also, look at the Gospels. Although Jesus started off as a Jew, you have the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles, which are both tracts written for Gentiles and a Gentile audience. And once Paul got involved, who never actually met Jesus in the flesh, had this miraculous vision, and I say vision in inverted commas, on the road to Damascus. He took the Jesus that wanted to reform Judaism into a better form of Judaism and pushed it to the boundaries of the heathen world, if you like. So he had to make Jesus superhuman.
I wish
you
Drew
see-
Paul had done the makeover on Jesus instead of Paul. It would have been a much more interesting character.
Certainly that there is strong evidence that Paul's Jesus bears no resemblance to the Jesus that's in the Gospels.
Oh yeah.
Or
No,
Paul's
that used to
Jesus-
be when I was more engaged with religious discussions and such. That was one of my favorite arguments to make. In fact, I think I pointed it out in a couple of the Atheist Reads videos I did back in the day. That like, because you know, a lot of the more conservative fundamentalist Christians, because not all Christians are like this, obviously, but the more conservative fundamentalist Christians who are like, the Bible is literally true and everything in it is factual, and nothing needs to be interpreted and nothing in it is metaphor or poetic. It's all literal history of stuff that really happened. And you know, one of their big points for that is, the gospel was written by people who knew Jesus, which isn't true, but they say it's true.
All of them,
But I like to come back at them and say, okay, well, let's just assume for the sake of argument. Let's just assume for the sake of argument that the Gospels were written by people who knew Jesus. I don't think that's true, but let's just say that's true. Most of the New Testament is not the Gospels. Most of the New Testament was written by Paul, who you all even admit never met Jesus.
Yeah,
So-
a great number of those.
I did a theology degree. Of course, he never met Jesus. What's the point of me getting a 2-1 and kind of going, oh no, I throw all that away because I believe in God.
Yeah, let's not forget the fact that a number of those epistles are known forgeries. Never mind the Gospel according to John, which has also been alleged to be a forgery and may be one.
Well, and is it Timothy, 1st and 2nd Timothy, or some? There's a couple of the Pauline epistles that contain really well known passages that are now widely considered to be forgeries.
All I know.
They wouldn't have been considered forgeries at the time. It's like the Pseudo-Dionysus. For years, people thought it was a man called Dionysus the Areopagite, who's mentioned in Acts of the Apostles. And then they conflated him with Saint Dionysus Saint Denis in Paris. Now we know that none of this is true, that it's a copy of something that somebody created round about 800, 900 AD. But because of this belief, it was called oh God, I did a 5,000 word essay on it. Now I can't remember what the bloody hell it's called. It's to do with the angel and the hierarchy of angels. He wrote this long, convoluted hierarchy of angels thing. So at the time when people wrote letters saying they were from Paul, people sort of said, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if it wasn't Paul because they're writing like Paul. They're writing in Paul's name. Because today we can go,
Paul was the first person to hire ghostwriters.
Yeah.
He just said, go ahead. Yeah, say whatever you want.
Look, I got another thing I'm doing. Would you take care of this for me?
It's why you get such weird things like Paul on one hand saying, when I think it's the church, one of the
The
churches,
Roman
either
Catholic
Corinth.
Church, that thing is just loose and goosey with the rules.
Oh, don't talk to me about the Roman Catholic Church. They have so much on their hands. What do you think? Why do you think one of my favourite Terry Pratchett books, although it's a standalone, is Small Gods? Because he gets religion absolutely dead to right. The idea that, you know, the new prophet's coming, so we need to lay down blood. Blood's very important for a new prophet. And you think, bloody hell, he's got it in one.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt again.
It's okay, go.
All I know is that if you read the Revelation of Paul sober, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
John the Revelator was obviously on some nice mushrooms he found on the island.
Yeah, that's
I'd recommend a good spliff to read. The Revelation of Paul.
It's like it's like a challenge to the literalists. It's like, okay, make some sense of this.
Yeah, no.
But
it's
I had
fun.
the most the only vicar I've ever listened to, and that was and this was after I sort of left the church, and this was some years, about 10 years after my brother had passed away. And I told him I was furious with God and that I didn't believe any of the epistles and it was all true. He said, well, you do have to remember that I know you said the church uses the epistles as a guide for daily life, but they were written for the people at the time. They're not written for people now. Because nobody gives a damn if you mix cotton and flax.
Can you imagine if in 2,000 years, like,
but they
Tony
sure give a
Robbins
damn
is
if
considered a
you're a
prophet?
man loving another man.
Yeah, they they pick their spots. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is why I'm with sort of Sam Harris says, yeah, you know, you sort of cherry pick the Bible. Well, people have cherry picked the Bible for generations, so you're not the first.
All religion has cafeteria religion.
Yeah.
Can you imagine in 2,000 years if they decide that The Art of the Deal, written by Donald Trump, is the basis
no,
of the
no,
Bible?
no, no, no,
Well,
no,
we don't
go
need
there.
to wait 2,000 years, man. There's people that do that right now.
You don't have to wait.
He's already selling cheap Bibles.
It's like
You can see that both Nick and I are having a physical response to that.
it's like everything he does is like he saw the bit about identifying the Antichrist and decided that was his playbook.
I bet I can do all of those.
Has anybody heard of a series called Left Behind?
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh
yes,
God.
I heard of that.
I worked at a Borders books when those were coming out.
Because my aunt, who's a little bit on the crazy side.
Oh dear.
Put it this way. When the Israel-Palestinian conflict flared up, she took the distinct joy in phoning me up and telling me that this was the end of the world, and that as me and my husband were atheists, we were doomed to hell for all eternity. Of course, if I'd had my wits
Love
about
you too.
yeah, something like that. If I'd had my wits about me, because apparently we owe her some money from what my mum borrowed from when my mum was still alive. If I'd had my wits about me, I'd have turned and said, "Well, if you're going to experience the rapture in the next few weeks, you won't need that money, will you?"
So I'm trying so hard not to like aggressively talk over anybody.
Sorry, go ahead. I always rattle on. I give permission for Steve to tell me to shut up.
Okay.
Only Steve though. But go ahead, Nick.
One thing I saw recently that really pissed me off was the Beetlejuice trailer. Okay, firstly, you know they're gearing up to make a third movie, which will just be Beetlejuice 3 times.
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah.
I gotta say, sorry, I don't know if anybody here has heard the game Half-Life, but it's about science and quantum stuff and other dimensions and so on. The sequel has the two raised up and shrunk down a little bit, so it looks like Half-Life Squared, which seems very on brand for that kind of. Anyway, I hated the Beetlejuice trailer because it's got all the hallmarks. It's got the echoey piano. It's got like the dramatic face of black, all these slow panning shots of all these gags from the first movie, and just this sense of awe and reverence, like all the things you saw as a kid are new again. I'm like,
hey, old people, we're here to take your money by giving you nostalgia. Like,
remember this?
I'm like, this isn't that important.
That's you just hit on something that is one of my pet peeves about. I mean, even like relatively good legacy sequels like that, they treat all of the stuff from the original like it's so important. Like the new Ghostbusters movies, like they treat the original Ghostbusters like some kind of sacred text, and I'm like, it's just a really funny movie. Like
You know
they treat it like it's this great artistic achievement. I'm like, it's just look, we all love it. It's a really funny movie.
But you know why they do that?
I couldn't remember
Because
what movie I went to see, but when I went to see Dune a few weeks ago, I'm sitting there next to my girlfriend, and I can't remember. It was it was Ghostbusters. It was all but one of no less than 10 trailers was a franchise or a reboot.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I just looked at it. I'm like, going, okay, one or two of those look vaguely interesting to me. I'm not saying don't do it, but I mean, more than half of them should be new ideas.
Yeah.
It was pretty much remakes and
Does
the
anyone
movie
remember
with
Babylon
Zendaya
5?
challenge.
Hell yeah!
Yeah. Right. Would you remember the bit where Jakar is writing his memoirs and it becomes a sacred text? And at
The
one
Book
point,
of Jakar.
and he's put a coffee mug down or something on one of the pages.
Yeah, I remember.
And every single codex after that has to have this stain on it because somehow
that actually was the Book of Jaquan, where
the coffee stain was the Book of Jakar.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And the point,
let's not fight.
And the point I think that Straczynski is trying to make is that these things that you think are sacred are just mistakes in the text.
Yeah.
That you can copy it out
supports the Star Trek.
Yeah.
Don't thump the Book of Jaquan. It is disrespectful.
But do you know why they do this? Why they do it so aggressively these days, especially. Remember Star Wars? I love The Last Jedi. I will defend that movie forever.
Oh yeah, same here.
That did a lot of things that pissed the nerds off. Like Luke throwing the lightsaber. It makes sense in universe because the last time he had that, his hand was cut off and he found out his dad was the bad guy. He associates that object with traumatic memories. Of course, he never want to see it again. But to the audience, it's this sacred relic. It's important to us, so it should be important to the characters. And so then they made the Rise of Skywalker as like a massive apology for everything that pissed off the nerds. Like, no. The lightsaber is important, and the X-wing is important, and all of these things are important. You're good. Your Star Wars is good, and you're good for liking Star Wars.
You haven't wasted your life.
I was so in two places with Last Jedi. When I walked out of it, I texted my best friend. I said, I am blown away. I don't know if I've just seen the best Star Wars of the franchise or if my childhood just died.
I'm going to say the following. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, please, go.
I have a cone, if you will, with continuity, because I am a continuity and lore freak. I admit it. I'm that kind of guy. But thanks to Steve and other people, I learned the following. If it works, I mean, continuity should be a tool, not a straitjacket.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
If it gives you new ideas and you go places like, oh, they did that in that episode, where does that take me? Okay, let's go over there. And that's good. But if you just miring in minutia about warps and, and lasers and stuff like that, and you're just recycling the same things, like, well, I've seen that before. Or you bring out, I don't know, the midichlorians because you wrote that in a page in 1977 somewhere. It doesn't make any sense. And nobody even heard about it. It's like, maybe don't.
Yeah.
But my point is like this: we don't get to have characters that are irreverent about objects anymore. This iconography, because it's so important in the real world, and that's why all these trailers are like, oh, here's that gag from that movie. Do you remember it was there for 5 seconds? Oh.
Yeah, that's a good. There needs to be. There needs to be, especially in these long running franchises, where and especially nowadays where it feels like because studios are so risk averse, and because the audience continues to fragment and get smaller and smaller for each thing, and there's always the tendency to just cater to the audience that's there so that you don't run them off. Like, there's so much fear in studio executives of like, well, we have to make the Star Wars fans happy, because if the Star Wars fans don't watch Star Wars, then nobody will. And there's no thought to, do a show that the Star Wars fans will like, but also maybe do something that other people will like too, and then you'll have more Star Wars fans. Like, there's no sense of that. It's like, no, we have to serve the existing audience as it continues to shrink and ebb away, because there's so much other stuff to watch. And you get that attitude of where everything is so important, everything is reverent, everything is like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. And you get this weird place where Star Trek is in now. Sometimes, not all the time, to be fair, but where Star Trek is in, where it's like the people, like the Star Trek shows are telling you how great Star Trek is. And that's not what I want. I don't want the show I'm watching to tell me how great the show is. Like, I want just make a good show. I don't need.
Show me why
Star Trek is think is that, if you look at, you brought up Star Wars. I think it's a good example, because the core audience for Star Wars, because I do think, especially with the sequel trilogy, I just don't think generated a new generation of fans in the same way that the prequels did. But the core audience for Star Wars is people who are a little bit older than me. I was born in 1977. Anybody born during the original trilogy release period, and then again, kind of during the prequel era. Whatever I think of the prequels, there's a generation that now loves the prequels, and with the Clone Wars and everything, which itself is great. But what the trick that they don't get is, we're going to get old and die. We're already old. The millennials that like the and the older Gen Zs that like the prequels, they're going to get old and die. If you're not telling new stories, you're not building your audience, and you're not going to survive.
I mean, to give you an idea of just how weirdly self-overcorrecting they are about these things now, in the sequel films, those like even bigger, more like knuckle-dragging AT-ATs, this is so stupid. They have these flaps on the front of the legs, these cutters that will snap any cables they try to wrap around the legs. Because one person did it one time in The Empire Strikes Back, and now this entire line of machines is modified in case anybody ever pulls that stunt again.
That
doesn't make sense. That's
that
like,
kind of writing annoys the hell out of me.
It can get so bad that there's a series. I know Steve is not a gamer, but probably everybody else might recognize Mass Effect. Mass Effect, big sci-fi video game RPG. They kind of screwed the landing, at least in my opinion. And so they decided, we're going to make a new game. It's going to be set 600 years in the future in a new galaxy. The first thing that happens when you switch it, I was like, I'm going to press the button to start, is what is the name of the main character? No, what's the gender of the main character of the last trilogy? And I'm like, I'm not playing as them. They're not here. I'm in a galaxy away. Why are you asking me this?
Exactly. Why?
The other thing that you mentioned when you said that continuity should be a tool, not a straitjacket, is something that Gene Roddenberry sort of created called the Roddenberry box.
Well,
and I know it
books
came
like
up...
that typically have a Bible to begin with. I mean, it's a basis to write from.
Yeah, but it did cause him problems with The Measure of a Man, because he did actually suggest that Data would like to be taken apart by Starfleet, which to us is kind of like, hang on, he's a sentient being. Why would you take apart a sentient being?
Yeah.
No, disassembled!
Did anybody else see Short Circuit? Come on. Didn't anybody else see Short Circuit?
Of course.
Yeah.
The sequel.
No disassemble.
Every month to bring up Short Circuit on this show.
There was an article this morning, I think it was on Giant Freaking Robot, that said Disney Plus subscribers are watching more old stuff than new stuff. And I think that's kind of an indication of what we've been talking about, the whole let's recycle this idea. Let's, I mean, let's face it, Star Trek the Motion Picture is basically instead of the name just escaped me.
It's a blown up version of the Changeling.
It's the most turgid Star sci-fi movie I think I've ever seen. And unless you watch it under alcohol or drugs, it's not worth watching.
It's like Gene Roddenberry. It's like Gene Roddenberry saw 2001: A Space Odyssey and said, "Let's do that, but Star Trek."
Yeah.
Pretty much. The thing is, though, the director's cut helps make it a lot more sense.
But like the thing about I think one of the reasons why people who subscribe to streaming services that have big libraries tend to watch older stuff more than the more recent stuff. Other than, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is nostalgia and they're going back and watching stuff that they've seen before that they know they like, but also a lot of the older stuff is just more accessible. Like, because it's not like when you watch when you watch Star Wars, you don't, there's no homework necessary. You just watch Star Wars and it makes sense because it's a movie. And even if you watch Empire Strikes Back, like, yes, of course, Empire Strikes Back means more if you've already seen Star Wars. And obviously most people who have ever watched Empire Strikes Back had already seen Star Wars because Star Wars was the biggest movie ever and Empire was the sequel. But even if somehow you go in and you just happen to find yourself sitting in front of a screen that's playing Empire Strikes Back and you've never seen anything else from Star Wars before, you'll be able to follow it. Like you'll get what the story is. Yeah, like it won't be, you won't pick up on everything, but you'll be able to follow the story and hopefully, you know, if it's your kind of story, you'll be able to get engaged with it. Like I know, I was talking to someone the other day, we were just talking about stuff and it was kind of in a similar vein as this. And like one of my favorite TV shows from the 90s was Nowhere Man, which was like this one season wonder from the first year of UPN. And it's like this great one season show that got canceled and, you know, it is what it is, but it has a very specific premise. And if you don't see the pilot episode, you don't see how the hero got into the situation that he is in for the rest of the series. It became my favorite show the first time I watched it. And I didn't see the pilot episode until like halfway through the season when they showed it as a rerun, right? Like the first episode of Nowhere Man I ever saw, I was just flipping through the channels looking for something to watch. And it was maybe 3 or 4 minutes into the second episode. And it hooked me because it was drama, because it was suspense, because I was intrigued by the acting and the situation. And I wanted to see what happened next. And I thought, oh shit, I'm watching this show, you know, and I figured out what the premise was from watching the show. And then, you know, like several weeks later, when I finally did get to see the pilot episode, I mean, it was a good episode and I was glad I saw it, but I didn't need it, you know, in terms of being able to follow the story, because the show was written in such a way that you could watch it and pay attention and follow along and you figure out what you need to figure out for it to make sense and for all the, you know, the important stuff to land. And it's like, it's hard to imagine someone watching like Ghostbusters Afterlife, having never seen Ghostbusters and getting really super involved in that story. You know,
what bugs me. One thing that oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Nick.
Okay. So like, spoilers don't ruin a story for me. The way I see it, if a story is only good without spoilers, it's just not worth engaging with. If the journey itself isn't compelling. I have a similar attitude when it comes to prequels. I am so sick of people saying, what's the point of this? There's no tension because we know they're going to survive to the end because they have to be in the next term. Like, what is this? Cinema sins? I care about what the characters went through. I want to know how they felt at the time when that stuff was happening. I want to get in their heads. I guess because I'm an empathetic person or so. I don't know.
And to get carried along by a story. I mean, that's the thing, is like, that's one of the criticisms I had a couple weeks ago when I was doing a Star Trek review of the Shuttle Pod 1 episode of Enterprise. And I said, my big problem with the episode is that Trip and Malcolm think that the Enterprise has been destroyed, but then we keep cutting back to Enterprise and everything's fine. And, you know, and I said, that's a problem with the episode. And people, you know, argue with me about it in the comments and say, well, yeah, but you know that Enterprise isn't really destroyed because it's a TV show and you know they're not going to blow up the ship that the show is named after and kill everybody except these two people. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point. The point is the episode pulls you into this specific perspective. and yeah,
They
of course, you
think
know,
it's
Well, the
yeah,
episode has to
exactly.
hang on its own.
And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's the same way. Yeah. Like thinking about reading a book for the second time or watching a movie or seeing a show for the second time, where you've seen everything that's going to happen. You know, every single thing that's going to happen because you've already watched it. But if it's good, it still pulls you in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
the problem
Titanic,
is
the reason,
look,
the reason Columbo was successful back in the 70s.
Yeah.
You knew who the murderer was.
That was
It
the,
was
yeah.
who done it. It was a how they did it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was
And
a
it's
matter
so
of
first 20
style.
minutes, you
And
saw
that
the
was the
murder,
same
and then you
thing
saw
that-
Columbo trying to figure it out.
and
Eugene Michael
they'll
Straczynski did
show
the same thing with Babylon 5.
Yeah.
The ending was already known. It was already put out there, you know, at the beginning of the show, practically, certainly by the second season. It was really about how you got there.
Yeah.
I was watching a Columbo episode, and my son said, "This is a lot like a new show I'm watching called Poker Face." You
Yes.
should
Very
watch
similar.
that.
Very similar structure.
And I ended up streaming the whole series at the same night because I thought it was just so well written and well done.
Yeah.
only
Poker
just
Face is great.
recently-
Yeah.
I only just recently discovered Columbo, and I love it. And
Yeah.
I love the formula.
Columbo's
Those-
very fun.
They'll spend a whole episode getting you to hate the murderer and want to see Columbo get them, and then he does, and it's always satisfying because you have no idea how he's gonna do it. You're just hanging on.
Yeah.
Shatner
Well, it's-
and Nimoy both were on Columbo,
Mm.
and
Oh,
the
yeah.
episode is excellent.
It's the same thing with, and I'll say this, and then there's a couple people, there's three people with their hands up. I'll get to you guys, and then I'm ending the goddamn show. But I just want to say that. But I just want to say this real quick
This is the
because
finale.
the idea of, well, my finale, and then you can say whatever. If people with their hands up can say whatever they're going to say. But like, the idea of you generally know what the ending is going to be, but that isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is how do you get there. That is, and I say this because WrestleMania is next weekend. That's key to the appeal of professional wrestling, and that's one of the things about just general storytelling. Even if you hate wrestling, that's one of the things about storytelling that people can learn from wrestling when it's done well, is that 9 times out of 10, at least when you get to the big match, the match that you've been building up to for weeks or months, most of the time the good guy is going to win that match. Now, not every time, but most of the time, if it's the big match that you've been asked to wait for and pay to see, the good guy is going to win that match. That doesn't mean that the good guy shouldn't win the match to double cross the people, to give them something. You say, oh, you didn't expect that, did you? You thought he was going to win, but he didn't. Haha. Like, that's not the right thing to do. You don't necessarily need to double cross the audience and surprise them. If you have gotten them to a point where where you get them to want a particular result, where they're actually invested in your story and they care about what happens, that's the most important thing. And then all you have to do is just not screw it up from that point to the end. Yeah.
Also, Steve, one wrinkle to that is even if you know that like the heroes are going to survive their journey, how they might not get through completely unscathed. How much might they have to give up to cross the finish line?
Yeah,
what's going to
That's
change?
true. And let's say you're watching a movie where there's 5 protagonists. There's no guarantee, even if the good guys win, there's no guarantee all 5 of them are making it to the end. That's another, Superman's going to defeat Lex Luthor. That's just the way the movie goes. It doesn't matter. What matters is how does he get there? Yeah. So anyway,
Sorry, Steve.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Geek, your hand is up first. Go for it.
Okay, so I'll be really quick. First of all, not only is Happy Easter or Happy Zombie Jesus Day as well too, it's also Trans Day of Visibility, which since it falls on like Easter, it gives a new meaning to the term egg hunting, doesn't it?
Yes.
And also this reminder of like all the links are there.
Links in the chat.
Live chat. It's like not only like the charity links, but the plug links. Please consider like Phoenix had to call the crisis line last night, but they're good. They're fine now. But like, good use of money anyway. And piggyback on like how like if you tell like Man of Steel, bad movie. Here's one of the reasons why it's a bad movie, because we see Superman in the beginning rescue those people on the oil rig.
Yeah.
And so we know that like Superman's going to rescue people at the beginning of the movie. I mean, yeah, Superman is Superman, and he'll do Superman things. Except this is the Zack Snyder and Ryan Superman who doesn't save people. So, but we didn't had tension throughout that whole movie. Is like, is he going to don the cape and help rescue people? Because we saw that at the very beginning that he did that, and so that's part of the reason that was a bad movie.
He acts less like Superman after he puts on the costume than he does before. Like all the people he saves are before he actually puts on the fucking costume.
Lauren, next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lauren, you go for it.
One thing I wanted to bring up was, especially thinking about, science fiction, new ideas and stuff like that. Although one of the problems I have with this is its total abuse of the laws of physics is the three-body problem. It seems to be incredibly well written and it's certainly reasonably well acted. It is convoluted as hell. But who here has actually seen, at least dug into three-body problem? Anybody at all?
I haven't
I
watched it
haven't
yet.
caught the show, but I've read the novels.
Okay, I haven't read the novels at all, but I'm intrigued with this. The liberties they're taking with the laws of physics bother the hell out of me. But I mean, and as some of you may or may not know, I'm an engineer, so I live and die with the laws of physics.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stick with it because it seems to be going somewhere interesting, and I want to see where it goes.
I could say stuff because I've read the books, but I feel like it's gonna be a spoiler for the show if I say anything.
Okay,
and if you just want to enjoy it in the show, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll probably finish. We'll probably manage through episode 8, which I think is the extent of the darn thing. By the next time I see you, presuming we aren't tasked with another redcoat assignment, at the end of April.
Okay.
So not good about that.
All right, Kara, your turn.
Right. I was merely going to say that, I know about the three-body problem, but I'm in two minds because my father he was a meteorologist first, but he was a sort of physicist second. So I'm damn sure that he actually contributed to something to do with NASA, though he never spoke about it. Hence the reason I think I told you, Steve, that yes, I had the pleasure of meeting Michael Collins. I was so incensed by my schoolgirls' reaction to Capricorn 1 when they said this is the real story of the moon landings, kind of wanting to kill people. So I actually wrote to Aldrin and said, explain the whole situation, said, I'm really sorry to bother you because you probably get asked a stupid question, but did you really land on the moon? And of course he wrote back and said, yes, I actually celebrated Mass on the moon.
Yeah, he did.
So, yes, I most certainly landed on the moon. So my dad was never of the belief that we never did land on the moon and we never sent probes up and all the rest of it. So, yeah, Lauren, I'm with you in that it's overall having the three-body problem, which is a psychological sort of thing anyway. But you have to have the physics to back it up. It's got to work. I mean, my dad would have turned around and said, if I said, well, you have to kind of be the ethereal, and Dad would go, yeah, love, it's all very well being ethereal and spiritual, but if the bloody rocket doesn't fly, you're not going anywhere.
And let me put it this way in 2 words: blink, blink. That's all I gotta say. That's all I gotta say.
I remember the old joke that Stanley Kubrick was hired to fake the moon landing, but to get as much realism as possible, he insisted on filming
I've heard that.
Yeah, he filmed it on location.
Stanley Kubrick was actually hired to fake the moon landings, but being such a perfectionist, he had to hire all the staff of NASA and everywhere else and actually go on location to do it.
Yeah. Look, we can't do this on Earth. The gravity's too heavy. Let's move it to the moon and we'll shoot it there.
Yeah. The only reason that can't possibly be true is that Stanley Kubrick would have insisted on shooting for so long that the moon, the Apollo program would have been twice as long as it wound up being.
Listen, the camera didn't work during that launch. Can we get another rocket out here?
Like all the astronauts would have been on the moon for like 8 years, so Stanley could get all of the footage he needed.
Plus the fact that there's
I didn't have enough time to abuse Shelley Duvall.
Oh God, yes.
Also footage, I think, if you ask how many flags are still on the moon now, there's actually footage of the camera pointing down at Tranquility Base, and as Apollo, I think it's oh God, what was the name? As the Eagle lifts off, it knocks
that's
the flag
11.
over. Yeah, It's 11. As 11 lifts off, it knocks the flag over. And Aldrin says something like, well, there goes the bloody flag.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And you think, yeah, that's not something that somebody would say. It's a really off-the-cuff comment. You kind of think, yeah.
Well,
damn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the moon landing footage that that the astronaut shot or that was broadcast, like not all of it, but a lot of it is publicly available that you can watch in more or less an unedited form. And anyone who watches enough of that, I don't see how you can possibly be a moon landing denier. It's like there are so many mistakes and so many technical problems and so many like off the cuff moments like that where it's clear that they're real people actually doing this. And it's like, okay, come on. This isn't, like a lot of moon landing deniers, they talk about it like there was one moon landing.
No.
It's like, no, there were like half a dozen moon landings, dude.
6.
Like, it wasn't just they did it once and then they're like, well, we did it. All right, it's done. Like, no. So did they fake it 6 times?
We haven't done it in 50 years. We did a
somebody
whole
asked me
bunch in like 5 years.
Somebody said to me about Apollo 13, they said when they didn't make the moon, so I said,
Yeah.
well, they faked it because they only went up and they went around the Earth a couple of times. That's why then they don't lose their temper. And I looked and said,
Apollo 10.
look, no, Apollo 13.
Yeah,
when
I know,
they had to,
going around.
and I said, oh, so these are men who've been in the military who are taught to keep cool under pressure, who are taught not to kind of strangle one another and beat one another's heads against the bulkhead. And you're telling me they're going to suddenly, I don't know, when they're running out of oxygen, go, oh my God, we're gonna die.
In a situation where they know they will die if they do that. Like if they do lose their cool,
worst bit is that Lovell, if you read
the situation has been specifically trained to not flip after.
Exactly.
If you read Lost Moon, and I have, he talks about the fact that it did occur to him that they wouldn't be able to make it. And he said, well, all we would do, we would just release the bulkhead. And he said, you lose consciousness in 20 seconds and you're dead in 40. And it's quick and painless and relatively, it's done. And I just thought that is awful. But at the same time, it's actually really kind of pragmatic. If this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. And we want it to be quick and painless and not gruesome.
Except that they knew that they were there to do a job and they did it.
Yeah.
And that is why Apollo 13 deserves all the kudos that it gets.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were in an extraordinary situation. Krantz down on the ground knew they were in an extraordinary situation. And the way those guys pulled together to get those guys home, I think is nothing short of extraordinary.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not the sort of thing that like that would have been invented as part of a hoax.
No.
Like it's not the sort of, because
I had an uncle who referred to Apollo 13 as the plot twist.
Like, oh, good, yeah.
The fact that we got to Apollo 13 is so perfect because when I first put my hand up, it was during our talk of what do you call it? Surprising the audience and that a story can still be good if you know the ending. And the first joke that came to my head is like, yeah, I agree with all that. But how brave would it have been in Apollo 13 if they would have had the astronauts die?
Although people actually turned around in the first test screenings, people turned around to the producer and said, this is wrong. You didn't make them die. This isn't real.
That's crazy. I've never heard that story. Wow.
You never heard that story? Yeah. People
they didn't die.
Yeah, people turned around
because they didn't die.
People said it's not believable. Mr. Harris, it's not believable.
That part is true.
I had a friend who said he wouldn't go see Apollo 13
like
because he
people
didn't see the first 12 movies.
It's like people that turn around and said, well, I don't know about why didn't the Titanic do X, Y, and Z? Because all those people died for nothing on that fictional ship. And I remember looking at it.
Oh my God.
Fictional?
Okay.
I beg your pardon? And she said, well, it's a film. I said, yes, but it's based on the real MSS Titanic that died in 19...
The most famous, the most famous seagoing disaster ever.
Yeah, you know how
Yeah.
you kind of want to spit out venomous stuff, and all you can think is you're trying not to shout at somebody for their ignorance,
Yeah.
and all you can think is, "Don't kill your family, don't kill your family, don't kill your family." It wouldn't look good if you reach out and strangle your cousin.
I will say, I mean, in the vein of, you know, what a gutsy move it would have been to change the ending of Apollo 13. I will always respect Quentin Tarantino for Inglorious Bastards, where he said, "Screw it, I'm changing the ending of World War II."
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, he changed that too. It's like, but by then I knew the trick. By then I was like, oh, he's just changing the ending again, which I still, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I still think is a great movie. But yeah, the first time I saw Inglourious Bastards, I think I saw it in the theater. And when we got to that point and they kill Hitler, like right there, and I almost said it out loud. I didn't, but I thought to myself, like, you son of a bitch, you changed the ending of World War II for your movie.
Because it waited for a better, more dramatic.
I mean, I just,
and he didn't just, and he didn't just,
he would have stood up and applauded.
And I love that he didn't.
Justice League does it with Vandal Savage. They have it's a 2-part or 3-part episode thing where Vandal Savage goes back in time with a whole load of tech and changes history, and the Justice League get him back in the end. But it doesn't change anything because the Nazi hero goes, well, it's a shame about Savage disappearing like that and all his technology, but we have a solution. And they open this cryogenic freezer and there's Hitler frozen in a block of ice. And you think, oh, fuck, yeah, I give up, you know?
Okay, Nick, you were trying to say something and then we're out of here.
And he didn't even go halfway by like making it tasteful or just one bullet. No. He just kept going until Hitler's face was a pulpy mush, and then they blew him up.
They tore him apart with machine guns.
It was getting blasted. Yeah,
it was fantastic.
He paid
all right.
Cremation.
Yes. Wait, Joe, did you like say your thing that you wanted to say? Well, you had your hand up.
Yeah, that was it.
That was the Apollo 13 thing. All right, we're done. We're ending the show. Everybody, thank you all so much for joining us. It was good to see everybody.
Yeah. Lovely to see you.
It was lovely that you could make it this time. Hopefully you'll come back.
Yeah.
Happy Trans Day of Visibility to everybody who celebrates, and happy Easter to everybody who celebrates, who isn't going to be an asshole about it also being Trans Day of Visibility.
Yeah. One question,
otherwise,
Steve, before you go. You're doing Poirot. Have you ever thought of doing Marple as well?
Maybe with the Wednesday streams, that part of it's kind of up to Dana. I don't know if she has seen Marple or not. I've never seen it, so it would work for my half because the idea is we switch off and we watch shows that the other one hasn't seen. So I've never seen any of Miss Marple, so we conceivably could, but
it depends which actress you want to go with, though.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got Joan Hickworth or Julia McKenzie, who is a bit naff. She's a bit too kind of twee and in particularly in A Pocket Full of Rye, in the Joan Hickworth one, when she says to the woman who marries the black sheep of the family who kills everybody, sorry, spoiler alert, she says, oh well, that person always marries a bad egg. And in the Julia McKenzie one, she basically turns around and says, you know, if anything happens, you won't despair, will you? For the love of God, you give it up. So it's a bit country, but she does do a good Pale Horse. That's about the only one of hers I like. But apart from that, it's Joan Hickworth, Julia McKenzie, and Geraldine McEwen. And I like Joan Hickworth and Geraldine McEwen best. They seem to kind of get the Miss Marple as she was.
When they try and shoehorn. Go ahead.
Yeah, when they try and shoehorn bits in, like she had this lover who was married, or she had a clandestine love affair, and she's now living alone as a spinster, I tend to go, no, that doesn't quite follow Miss Marple. It's like making an asexual character suddenly sexual, and I don't think Christie ever wrote them like that.
Yeah.
You
I'll
don't
have to. I'll have to talk to Dana about it. We still have a good bit
Okay.
of Poirot to get through, so
Yeah.
we're not really. I don't think she's even thought about what. And also, it's I'm constantly, you know, working on the assumption. You know, Dana might just decide she doesn't want to do this anymore, and we're not going to. Like that's why I always say, like, because you know, it started as we're, you know, that. The anchor of it is that we're watching Deep Space Nine, which she's never seen, and I regularly say, you know, we'll get to this episode in some future season if we're still doing the show, and Dana hasn't completely given up and said I don't want to watch any more Star Trek. You know that. So if we're still going.
Yeah, 30 years hence, you know, you a doddering old man with a beard down to your waist and Dana with a grey hair and a bun going, I told you I don't want to see the last episode of Deep Space Nine.
I don't care how it ends. Just let's stop, please.
I don't care anymore.
But don't you want to see what happens to Wei Yun? It's really funny. All right.
Anyway.
All right, that's perfect if it got to the penultimate episode, and then cuts it there.
That's the ultimate power move, though. That's the ultimate power move. You get to the second to last episode, and then you go, "I'm done. I don't care." There's one episode left. I don't care.
Like David Chase did with the Sopranos ending.
Yeah,
you make up your mind.
Exactly, and then there's some kind of resolution. Anyway, all right, that's it. We're done. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll do this again. We'll do this again next month. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.